Spiritual awakening is often imagined as a burst of endless energy and enthusiasm, but Jung discovered the opposite. Awakening strips away illusions that once fueled you. Instead of being set on fire with purpose, you feel drained, emptied, and unable to summon the old drive. This emptiness feels confusing because you expected awakening to ignite motivation. Instead, it extinguishes every flame that once pushed you forward. The goals that used to excite you suddenly appear meaningless. The ambitions that once defined your life collapse into silence, leaving only a hollow space. Jung explained that this emptiness is not a mistake but a paradox of awakening. You become conscious enough to see through false desires, yet not fully reborn into authentic ones. What feels like failure is actually the necessary clearing before new purpose can emerge. Jung described the awakening paradox as a cruel twist of transformation. The moment you see through illusions with absolute clarity, life suddenly feels confusing. What once looked solid dissolves. What once felt meaningful collapses into emptiness. Awareness expands while motivation vanishes, leaving you suspended in limbo. This paradox unsettles seekers because it feels backward. You expected enlightenment to bring joy, but instead it brings indifference. You thought awakening would fill your life with purpose, but instead it drains it. Jung saw this paradox not as punishment, but as a doorway into deeper authenticity. The awakening paradox is the space between old and new selves. The ego has died, but the authentic self has not yet been born. Clarity strips away false motives, and confusion arrives to keep you still until something genuine can emerge from the emptiness. Losing motivation after awakening feels frightening, but Jung insisted it is not failure. It is a stage of psychological death where old goals dissolve. The emptiness you feel is clearing space. Without this collapse, authentic purpose has no room to grow inside your conscious awareness. Most people panic when motivation disappears. They assume something is broken or lost. In reality, the absence of drive means illusions are dying. The ego has lost its fuel. This stage is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of true transformation. Jung compared this stage to a chrysalis. The caterpillar dissolves before the butterfly is born. Losing motivation is the same dissolution. Your identity melts into formlessness. It looks like destruction, but it is sacred preparation. From this emptiness, authentic impulses will eventually emerge with clarity. Jung discovered that most human goals are illusions. They appear meaningful on the surface, but beneath them lies fear and conditioning. Career success often hides fear of failure. Relationships often mask fear of loneliness. Achievements often disguise the need for approval. Ego builds purpose on fragile ground. When awakening strips these illusions away, motivation disappears because its foundation was false. The ladder you were climbing turns out to lean against the wrong wall. You see that what you thought was ambition was actually fear. What looked like passion was really pressure to conform. This revelation is painful because it invalidates years of striving. Yet Jung insisted it is liberating. Once you see through false motives, you can stop wasting energy chasing hollow goals. The collapse of illusion clears space for authentic desires rooted in truth to emerge. When awakening arrives, the old engines of ambition collapse. The constant striving fueled by fear and approval no longer works. What once drove you forward suddenly feels meaningless. You find yourself in a strange void, emptied of purpose, unable to revive the motivations that once defined you. This void feels unbearable because it offers no direction. The ego craves goals, but awakening has dismantled them. You no longer believe in the reward society promised. You cannot return to old illusions, yet no new purpose has appeared. You exist suspended between death and rebirth. Jung explained that this void is not emptiness, but sacred space. It is the psychological womb where authentic purpose gestates. The silence you now face is preparation, not punishment. The false drives had to be stripped away so that new motivation could emerge from truth. After awakening, Many people try to revive their old ambitions. They chase careers, relationships, and achievements that once gave them energy. But Jung warned this is impossible. Returning to ego-driven goals is like forcing a butterfly back into its cocoon. The transformation cannot be reversed. When the old self has dissolved, pretending to care about former goals becomes exhausting. The soul refuses to be fooled. What once energized you now feels hollow. Forcing yourself to fit old molds only deepens despair. Awakening makes it impossible to unsee the truth you discovered. Jung explained that trying to live by outdated motivations is self-betrayal. It means rejecting your own evolution. Just as the butterfly cannot shrink back into the caterpillar, you cannot return to the comfort of illusions. Awakening requires forward movement, even if direction is unclear. Jung turned to alchemy to explain the collapse that follows awakening. He called it the Nigredo, the blackening stage. In alchemy, raw material must first decay before transformation begins. In psychology, your old identity must dissolve completely before something authentic and new can emerge from within. The Nigredo feels like darkness, confusion, and loss. Old motivations are dead, but new ones are unborn. You are suspended in formlessness, too awake to return to illusions, yet not strong enough to live fully conscious. Jung taught that this blackening is the first step of rebirth. Although frightening, the Nigredo is sacred. It strips away false purposes and prepares the psyche for authentic impulses. Without this death, real transformation cannot happen. The blackening is not the end, but the beginning. The necessary night before dawn, the fertile soil where the soul takes root. In the Nigredo, your old identity dissolves completely. The ambitions, roles, and labels that once defined you no longer hold meaning. Yet the new self has not arrived. You are left in psychological limbo, suspended between endings and beginnings, unsure of who you really are. This limbo feels unbearable because the ego craves certainty. Without old goals, you drift through life without direction. Every attempt to reclaim the past fails, yet no vision of the future appears. It is the twilight zone of the psyche, where everything familiar disappears into shadow. Jung explained that this state is essential. The old self must truly die before the authentic self can be born. Limbo is not punishment, but preparation. It is the stillness before transformation, the cocoon stage of consciousness where dissolution quietly prepares the way for renewal. The psychological death that follows awakening is deeply painful. You grieve the loss of ambitions that once defined you. Friends may not understand why you no longer care about the goals you pursued. It feels like life has collapsed, yet Jung taught this collapse is sacred preparation. Without this death, authentic purpose cannot emerge. The ego clings to illusions of success and validation. Only when those illusions dissolve can the deeper self speak. Pain clears the space. Emptiness becomes fertile ground. What feels like destruction is the necessary soil for new meaning to grow. Jung compared this stage to alchemy. The material must burn to ash before gold can be formed. Likewise, your old identity must crumble before the authentic self appears. The pain of death is the doorway to renewal. It is the price of birthing real purpose. Maria sought enlightenment through years of meditation and study. One day she experienced what mystics call ego death, dissolving into universal consciousness. At first, she felt euphoric and free. She saw through the illusion of separation and tasted divine clarity. For weeks, everything felt radiant and whole. But the bliss soon vanished. Maria could not get out of bed. She stopped eating, abandoned work, and ended relationships. Not from sadness, but from indifference. Nothing mattered anymore. Goals seemed fake. Achievements felt pointless. Even love appeared as attachment. Awakening stripped her of every reason to live. Jung recognized Maria was not broken. She was in the Nigredo, the blackening stage where the old self dies. Her emptiness was not failure but transition. She had left illusions behind, but had not yet found authentic purpose. She was psychologically homeless, awaiting rebirth. Thomas spent 15 years building a successful business, convinced he was driven by passion for entrepreneurship. Yet after a profound awakening, his motivation collapsed. He confessed to Jung that every late night, every sacrifice, and every decision had been fueled not by vision, but by fear of failure. What looked like ambition was actually anxiety disguised as purpose. Awakening exposed this deception. Jung called it purpose poisoning, the mistake of confusing ego-driven goals for authentic calling. Thomas realized his company was an elaborate mask hiding insecurity. Success only deepened emptiness because it was never real. Jung helped Thomas see that losing motivation was liberation. The business had been built on fear, not truth. Awakening tore away illusions that once enslaved him. For the first time, Thomas was free from unconscious compulsions. The collapse of false purpose created the opening for authentic desire. David once pursued law with relentless effort, driven by fear of financial insecurity and the need for parental approval. After awakening, every trace of motivation for his legal career disappeared. He felt lost and broken, believing he had failed when in truth his false motives had died. Slowly, David noticed new impulses. He felt drawn to spend long hours in nature. Walks in forests filled him with peace and clarity. Ideas about environmental conservation arose spontaneously. This did not feel like ambition. It felt like remembering something deeply familiar, as if his soul whispered directions. Jung called this ontological motivation, purpose that emerges from being rather than wanting. David was no longer driven by scarcity or fear. Instead, he acted from alignment with his authentic nature. What seemed like a collapse of ambition was the discovery of a deeper calling. Elena was a successful marketing executive, driven by ambition and financial goals. After awakening, her drive collapsed. She no longer cared about promotions or recognition. For 2 years, she drifted without motivation, believing something was wrong. Yet beneath the emptiness, something quiet and authentic was beginning to stir. She felt impulses to create art, something she had loved in childhood but abandoned for career. At first she painted privately, with no intention to sell or impress. The act itself felt like breathing. Creation became a form of healing, a way to reconnect with her soul. Gradually, others discovered her paintings and found comfort in them. People said her art helped process grief and trauma. Elena realized her purpose was not to build an art career, but to bring healing through beauty. Her authentic motivation emerged naturally, beyond ego or recognition. Ego motivation always feels urgent and restless. It whispers that you must act now or risk losing everything. It pushes with anxiety and fear. It demands recognition and validation. It is rooted in the persona, the social mask that seeks approval and avoids rejection at any cost. This type of motivation drains energy rather than creating it. You work to prove your worth, not to express your truth. Achievements never satisfy for long because they are built on insecurity. Ego motivation feels like running on a treadmill, expending effort but never arriving anywhere real. Jung explained that ego motivation enslaves people to illusions. They mistake fear for passion and approval for purpose. The persona feeds them endless goals, each one designed to protect against shame or insignificance. Ego motivation is powerful but fragile, collapsing quickly when exposed by spiritual awakening. Soul motivation feels entirely different from the restless urgency of ego. It arrives quietly, calm and magnetic, pulling you forward instead of pushing from behind. It does not demand or threaten, it invites. This motivation is rooted in the self, the authentic center of your being. Unlike ego motivation, soul motivation does not drain energy, it generates it. You feel alive, as though creation itself is moving through you. Instead of asking what you must do, you feel grateful for what you get to do. The drive comes from abundance, not scarcity. Jung taught that soul motivation cannot be forced. It emerges naturally when ego desires have dissolved. It does not seek validation or approval. It simply expresses what you are. This authenticity makes it sustainable. Soul motivation aligns with your essence, making work feel like a natural flow. Awakening dismantles every false drive. The ego's motivations collapse first, leaving you empty. This gap feels unbearable because the new fuel has not yet appeared. Jung explained that awakening kills ego motivation before soul motivation can be born. The void is the sacred space between death and rebirth. Many people panic in this gap. They think something is broken. They try to resurrect old ambitions or force themselves back into ego-driven goals. But Jung warned this only deepens despair. The butterfly cannot return to the cocoon. Old fuel is gone forever. Something new must emerge. The emptiness is not a mistake. It is the natural pause before transformation. Ego motives must die so that authentic motives can grow. The space in between is uncomfortable, but it is holy ground. Awakening kills illusions first, so the soul can later reveal its truth. Jung taught that the first stage of transformation is conscious dissolution. This means allowing old ambitions to die without clinging to them. Instead of pretending you still care, you grieve them honestly. You acknowledge what they gave you and release them with respect, creating space for renewal. Sacred grieving transforms emptiness into a meaningful process. You might write letters to former dreams, thanking them for the energy they once provided, while admitting they no longer serve you. Mourning old goals prevents you from trying to resurrect them and helps your psyche accept their death. Conscious dissolution accelerates healing. When you resist loss, you suffer longer. When you cooperate with it, space opens more quickly for authentic impulses to emerge. Grieving ambitions is not weakness but strength. It shows you honor your past while preparing for the deeper truth waiting to be born. Jung's second stage is active imagination, a technique for contacting the unconscious. Instead of forcing goals with logic, you invite the deeper self to speak. You sit quietly, ask what wants to be born through you, and wait for images, words, or feelings to arise spontaneously. The key is to listen without judgment. At first, the impulses may seem strange or impractical, yet they carry authentic truth. Jung encouraged patients to follow these subtle signs, even when they made no rational sense. Authentic motivation is rarely logical at the beginning. It reveals itself gradually. Through active imagination, you begin a dialogue with your emerging authentic self. The unconscious responds with symbols and impressions. These whispers form the foundation of soul motivation. Instead of pushing for purpose, you receive it. In this openness, new desires aligned with your essence begin to surface. The final stage Jung described is symbolic living. Instead of chasing rigid goals, you begin to follow symbols, synchronicities, and impulses that resonate with your inner truth. Life starts guiding you through subtle signs. What once looked like coincidence now appears as meaningful patterns pointing toward authentic direction. Symbolic living does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means aligning with a deeper intelligence that speaks through experiences, dreams, and encounters. Jung taught that by following what fascinates and energizes you, even when it makes no logical sense, you align with your authentic path and inner calling. This stage transforms life into a dialogue with the unconscious. Opportunities unfold naturally instead of being forced. You feel guided rather than pressured. Symbolic living teaches that your soul already knows where you belong. Your task is not control but trust, allowing authentic purpose to emerge. Jung called the path from dissolution to symbolic living the psychological resurrection process. It begins with death, the collapse of ego motives, but ends with rebirth into authentic purpose. Resurrection here is not religious metaphor. It is the psyche rebuilding itself around truth rather than illusion and fear. Through this process, the void transforms from emptiness into fertile ground. Old ambitions are grieved, authentic impulses are heard, and life becomes guided by deeper meaning. What once felt like collapse becomes foundation, Psychological resurrection is the art of turning spiritual crisis into conscious rebirth and renewal. Jung emphasized that this process cannot be rushed. Resurrection unfolds at its own pace. Trying to force new purpose creates spiritual bypassing and false goals. By honoring each stage consciously, you allow authentic motivation to appear naturally, carrying the unshakable power of the soul's deepest calling. The emptiness you feel after awakening is not true absence. Jung taught it as sacred pregnancy, a state where new possibilities are forming invisibly. What feels like nothingness is actually potential waiting to emerge. The void is alive with seeds of purpose not yet ready to bloom. Most people panic in this stage because they mistake emptiness for failure. They try to force old ambitions back into life. But the psyche cannot be tricked. The emptiness remains until you surrender. Jung explained that surrender transforms the void into fertile ground for authentic growth. Think of winter when the earth looks barren, yet silently prepares for spring. The void of awakening works the same way. Beneath the silence, new life is forming. Emptiness is not the end of purpose. It is the season where authentic purpose gathers strength before appearing. Jung compared this to the chrysalis of a butterfly. From outside it looks lifeless, yet inside transformation is happening. Emptiness after awakening is the chrysalis stage of the soul. It conceals the process of rebirth. Your task is patience, trusting the hidden work of inner renewal. When you stop fearing emptiness, you discover it is full. Every silence contains guidance. Every stillness hides new energy. The void is not a mistake but a womb. Authentic impulses are gestating quietly within you, waiting for the right moment to be born into action. When authentic impulses finally appear, they feel different from ambition. Jung observed they carry the quality of remembering rather than striving. It does not feel like inventing a new goal. It feels like recognizing something you have always known, a quiet truth buried beneath years of illusion. Soul impulses emerge gently. Instead of pressure, there is invitation. Instead of anxiety, there is calm recognition. You realize you are not chasing anything. You are allowing what already belongs to you to surface. This is why soul motivation feels natural, as though life itself is remembering you. These impulses rarely shout, they whisper. They arise in small fascinations, quiet joys, subtle callings. Following them feels like coming home rather than reaching outward. Jung explained that soul impulses are the language of the deeper self. They reconnect you with the essence you had forgotten but never lost. Jung noticed that authentic motivation feels less like obligation and more like privilege. Ego says I have to achieve this or I will fail. Soul says I get to express this because it is who I am. The energy shifts from pressure to freedom, from fear to joy. This transformation is subtle but life-changing. Tasks no longer feel like burdens. They become natural expressions of being. You paint, write, teach, or help not to gain approval, but because it feels inevitable. Soul motivation turns daily action into alignment instead of struggle or self-sacrifice. When life becomes about I get to rather than I have to, everything changes. Energy flows easily, resilience increases and meaning deepens. Authentic motivation does not demand constant effort. It sustains itself because it emerges from abundance. The shift in language reflects the shift in essence. Jung taught that the void is sacred because it clears away illusions. Ego motives must die before soul motives can be born. If old ambitions remained, they would crowd out authentic impulses. Emptiness is the necessary fire that burns false purpose to create space for truth. The sacred void feels terrifying because it strips you of identity, yet within its silence lies the seed of rebirth. Jung explained that resisting the void delays transformation, while surrendering to it accelerates the process. The death of ego motives is painful but profoundly purifying. When you learn to honor the void instead of fearing it, emptiness transforms into sacred ground. It is the womb of new life. Ego-driven goals collapse so that soul-driven purpose can rise. The void is not your enemy. It is your initiation. Jung discovered that authentic purpose cannot be hunted or forced. As long as you chase false goals, you block true ones from appearing. Real purpose arrives when you stop running. It finds you in silence, in stillness, in the space left behind by abandoned illusions and empty ambition. False purposes are always loud. They demand urgency, recognition, and endless striving. So purpose is quiet. It emerges naturally once the noise has faded. Jung explained that chasing ego-driven ambitions is like running in circles. Only when you stop moving can the path you truly belong to appear. When you release false purposes, you realize you never needed to create meaning. You only needed to uncover it. Real purpose has been waiting beneath the surface of your being. It does not need chasing, it simply needs space. In stillness, purpose comes to claim you. Awakening did not steal your drive. It destroyed the false engines that once pushed you. Jung explained that what died was not motivation, but limitation. The fear-based ambitions collapsed so that something deeper could rise. The emptiness is not loss. It is the clearing for authentic expansion. Most people misinterpret this stage as failure. They believe their spark has vanished forever. In truth, the spark has been freed from cages of ego and fear. What feels like burnout is liberation. Motivation has not ended. It has been stripped of illusion so it can return pure. When you understand this, the paradox makes sense. Awakening did not kill your motivation. It prepared it for transformation. What remains is stronger, calmer, and sustainable. It comes not from proving yourself, but from being yourself. Your limitations died so your limitless essence could finally guide you. The emptiness you feel after awakening is not a mistake. It is the passageway between illusion and truth. Jung revealed that what looks like collapse is sacred preparation. You are not broken. You are being remade. The void is simply the threshold of authentic purpose waiting. Awakening strips away fear-based ambition so that soul-driven desires can emerge. Ego goals die, but new life is forming in silence. Your task is patience, trust, and conscious waiting. Motivation will return, not as a demand of the ego, but as a calling of the soul. Remember, awakening did not kill your motivation. It killed your limitations. From the ashes of false ambition, a deeper purpose is born. When you stop chasing illusions and learn to honor the void, you become a channel for authentic life. Real motivation begins here.